Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to Inago Academy's webinar. Today, we'll be sharing with you the top 10 tips for avoiding journal rejection. Before I proceed, let me perform a quick sound check. Is everybody able to hear me clearly? If you're able to hear me clearly, just type yes into the chat box. Okay, can everybody hear me well? Okay, that's good. That's good. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so let's proceed. Okay, so this is going to be the agenda for the day. We'll be discussing the types of papers, the structure of an academic manuscript, how to write an academic paper, the do's and don'ts, what exactly publishers expect from manuscript authors, checklists for journal selection and manuscript submission, and tips for avoiding journal rejection. And finally, of course, we'll be sharing a few resources with you. Now, moving on to the next slide, the main types of papers. So now, as you may be aware, research articles are basically solicited and unsolicited manuscripts describing new scientific findings, whereas case reports are medical or case-based reports detailing the symptoms, signs, diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up of an individual patient. In general, for unique therapeutic approaches or unexpected events occurring during patient treatment. So those are case reports. Review articles, as you all know, they basically present an overview of research articles on a specific topic. And finally, communications or letters are short articles that can have a larger impact on that particular field. So that's the basic breakup. Now, before we start, we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions. First of all, we need to look at the existing literature. Look at the literature and take notes. All this will help you to understand the research gap. The research gap that your own research paper can address and help you to decide the direction that it should take. It will also help you familiarize yourself with the styles and structures of writing required for papers in your field. Of course, don't forget to note down references while you're doing these activities. And most importantly, when you're basically trying to note down your references, do not do it manually. Use a reference manager such as Mendeley Desktop. This will basically facilitate the process of reference management to a significant extent. So moving on, the research funnel basically signifies how research basically starts off with a broad area of interest and eventually narrows down to a niche area, to a highly specialized area based on the evidence available. So initially it's like a broad area, and then you do some literature survey and you identify the research gap. Then depending on your area of specialization, you try to propose a set of questions, research questions, on which you can base your research study, and that's going to basically address the research gap. So this is basically the research funnel. Now, once you have discovered what you know, as well as what others know, it is time to work out how you should arrange your paper. You can do this through the process of brainstorming. Everyone brainstorms in a different way, and you should do this in the way that is most appropriate for you. Really, I mean, it's a very simple process of writing down all your thoughts and connecting your ideas, but in a very logical manner. Brainstorming helps you begin to think about how to structure your paper, and that is really very important. You need to structure your paper really well. To begin with, just try to make connections between your ideas and data. Which ones complement or contradict each other? Then group similar ideas together, as this will make it easier to locate and order them later on. Then check whether you have collected enough data and have enough research, as your paper should not make any unsubstantiated claims. Of course, you have to support your claims by conducting and presenting good literature survey. It's perfectly fine to stand on the shoulders of giants, because that's basically, how research progresses. Then structuring your academic paper in the IMRAD format is really very critical. So by IMRAD, what I mean is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So once you have written down everything you know and worked out your research aims, as well as what differentiates your approach from the other literature in your field, you're ready to begin to structure your material. And structuring the paper is really critical, because if you have an unstructured paper, it's likely to get rejected. So this is a very important area. It's very critical, and you need to really structure your paper really well in order to avoid rejection. Now, there are, of course, many different types of academic paper structures, and they usually vary depending on your discipline. However, as a general rule, your paper should begin with a general overview and end by addressing your specific research question. You need to be very specific. That is what really matters. In the area of research, you always need to be very specific. You need to identify a very specific research gap, and you need to basically propose a very specific solution for that. And for that, you need to have enough data to support your claims. Once again, IMRAD, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. It's basic. It's a very common organization structure, and mainly it's unique to the field of natural sciences. Using the format allows readers to navigate articles easily, to locate material relevant to their purpose. If in doubt about the structure of the research paper in your discipline, you can either ask your supervisor or basically look at the journal guidelines. Now, this is something I need to stress upon heavily. Many authors do not go through the journal guidelines carefully, and that is the #1 reason for journal rejection. They draft their manuscript, they submit to the journal, only to find out that the manuscript is not in the right format. So the first thing that you need to do is to carefully review the journal guidelines of your target journal. Another important point that should be emphasized here is the usage of keywords. They are generally mentioned after the abstract, and many journals list keywords separately in the article. There are guidelines for that too. So just make sure whatever is your target journal, just go and read the journal guidelines very carefully. Now, many people make the mistake of finalizing the title, abstract, and the conclusion first, and then proceeding in that manner. That's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to basically begin with your data, your figures, tables, whatever numbers you have generated, then work on the methods, results, discussion, then work on the conclusion and introduction, and in the end, all the way towards the end, you design a good title, abstract, and then you identify the appropriate keywords. So that's the right way to do it. Now let's look at each of these individual components. So what's a title? A title should not be too long. Usually it's like less than 20 words long. It should be accurate. It should be very field specific, and you should use field specific keywords. And of course, just like I said before, it should be finalized in the end. You should never finalize the title just before or as soon as you start writing or drafting your manuscript. Here are a few examples. So basically, if you follow these guidelines, the odds of your manuscript getting accepted will increase significantly, and you won't face rejection outright or right away upfront. So basically, again, just like I said, you need to have the structure in place. You need to have a good title. So let's see what comes after the title. Of course, the title and abstract are most likely to be the first elements of your paper reader will see. But then there is something called as a running head. So what is a running head? A running head is basically a shortened version of your title. And there are various, style guides, and like for example, APA recommends that the running head be no longer than 50 characters, including spaces. Now, this running head gets added to every page of your manuscript. So here's an example. The title is "The Effects of Running on Heart Health in Elderly Patients." So the corresponding running head, or the condensed version of the title, will be "Running and Heart Health in Elderly Patients." Now, after the title, the abstract is the most read element of a manuscript. The abstract is where you consolidate the reader's interest in your paper and explain to them exactly why your full article deserves attention, why they should ever bother to read your article. An effective abstract will help ensure your paper passes the first stage of peer review and go on to be reviewed. Okay, so moving on. Now, let's see what are the expectations of the next section, the introduction section. So basically, the introduction explains the general. It basically gives you the general information and what is the current state of the field. Then it should basically talk something about the research question, and then it should say something about the aim of your research. So introduction is arguably the most important section of the research paper, and all academic articles have them. It is important to spend time to get your introduction right. Otherwise, your paper may seem completely incoherent. Now, try to find a piece of data or some information that is particularly confronting or interesting to include in your introduction. This will help to capture the attention of your readers. You must give your readers a reason to keep reading. Within the introduction, you can use general statistics from national or international organizations to convey a number that helps build the story of why your article is important. So like why at all people should bother to read your articles. So now moving on, the next section is the literature review section. Now, depending on the format required for your field, the literature review may be a separate short essay or a paragraph or two simply appended to the introduction with no heading. Your literature review can help you use scholarly works in your field to help substantiate the claims made in your paper. So basically, you need to summarize the most important aspects of the existing literature, and because that's the basic aim. You want to identify the research gap and then convey this to your readers, that how you have been successful in identifying the research gap and then proposing a research question. So moving on, we have the methods section. So if you have constructed, if you have basically carried out a good literature review, chances are that you have already outlined your methodology, and you already know what you're doing. However, if your research is based on the collection of data rather than on the reading of secondary sources, you will need to provide a method section. So the method section is really important. It provides the criteria by which your research will be judged. This section usually contains a concise description of the research carried out in lab, and it needs to be really detailed. So let's say if I draft a very accurate method section, then my colleague located in another city, working in another research laboratory, should be able to reproduce my results. So the method section indeed needs to be very accurately drafted for others. Then basically you could include description on the subject of the experiment, the location and duration of the study, what were the experimental procedures, and so forth and so on. So this information should be organized in a way that is logical and clear to your reader. So moving on, we then have the results section. The results section is important because it is where you detail your research findings. This is where everything starts to come together. So, they always say one thing: a research paper is basically like conveying a story. So do you have the model ready with you? Do you know what the bigger picture is? Do you know what the story is? So all these things start becoming clearer and clearer as you go deeper and deeper into your manuscript. So once people reach the results section, they know exactly what you have found out, how probably you have addressed the research gap. And then, of course, they will continue and read the discussion and the conclusion, and yeah, that's how it works. Now, your data should directly correspond to your research aims. Your results section should be clear, concise, easy to read and follow. It should contain no information that is not related to your research aims. Tables and figures are often used to represent data. As part of your literature survey, you should collect examples of tables and figures that have been used to present data and results based upon similar analysis techniques. This is particularly good if they come from the journal in which you plan to publish. So I'll always say one thing: if you are basically trying to submit to a journal, let's say you're trying to submit to the proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, then it's a good idea to read a few papers published in that journal. So you know exactly what is the style, what are the expectations, what is the format, and then you can structure your paper accordingly. So that's really essential. Without reading at least one manuscript from your target journal, you should never submit or make an attempt to submit to that journal. Okay, now structuring the discussion section is very important. You need to plan each paragraph, and each paragraph should have a central idea or theme. Then you should use topic sentences to express the main idea. Each paragraph should have a concluding sentence leading to the next topic. So it should be like a, various compartments of a train. It's like a long train, and you have like an engine, and then you have several compartments. So it's like A leading to B, leading to C, leading to D and E. All of those are connected. So that's how you should structure the discussion section. So basically, the discussion section should also remind the reader of the research question under investigation. It should tell the reader what you want them to get from the data. You should state which differences are critical, highlight the important trends. Whatever trends you see, you need to highlight them. And then you need to indicate whether the hypothesis is supported, rejected, or partially supported. Now here, please never get biased. What you need to do is, let's say you propose a particular, you hypothesize something, and by the time you finish the research study, you find that whatever you propose is not actually what's happening. In that case, you should be very clear and transparent in saying that the hypothesis is only partially supported. You have to be very, very honest, because if you say that it is fully supported and the reviewers find out that it is partially supported, the chances of your manuscript getting rejected increase significantly. So just be transparent, just be very clear, and just say exactly what you see. That is really critical. That will help you increase the odds of manuscript acceptance. All right, so moving on. Now, let's see what we have in the conclusion section. So finally, you're ready to construct the conclusion of your paper. The conclusion should summarize the major claims of your paper. but only those that are necessary for confirming your argument. You may also present any complications brought to light by your research or suggest further research that may be necessary. No, not everything goes on smoothly, So let's say you start at some point and, you basically design a set of experiments, but then but then you see that there are a couple of contradictions. If you see any contradictions, you need to mention them, and you need to mention them very transparently. That is very critical. So basically, this will help in advancing, research in your particular area. You need to avoid overgeneralizing the results, and then you have to link back to the research problem. So that's how you have to structure your conclusion section. Okay, now acknowledging the sources is very important. Now there are various ways of doing that, and of course there is no such thing as a right way and a wrong way. The only way that is correct is the way recommended by the target journal. So let's say you're trying to publish a paper in Nature, then you need to follow the style guidelines recommended by Nature. If you're trying to publish a paper in Science, then you need to follow the style guidelines recommended by Science. So basically, in order to acknowledge the original and secondary sources when writing, there are a number of verbs that you can use. And these are just a few examples. You can say, Zizek argues that, or Zizek makes a case for. You could end the sentence with something like, as shown in a study conducted by some university, or you could say, as reported by, and these are some of the reporting verbs. Now, after we finish today's webinar, all the attendees are going to get a link to the recorded video session. So the entire webinar has been recorded, is being recorded, and all the attendees will be getting a link to the recorded webinar. So in case you wish to go back and check the session, what was mentioned, and what was there on the slides, you can always do that. We'll be sharing the link with you, and this will be much better than sharing the actual PowerPoint, because you'll also have the audio part included. So is that okay with everybody? Everybody is happy with that? All right, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Okay, so let's move on. Now here are a few tips for in-text referencing. Now there are various styles, when you refer to secondary sources in your research report, it is imperative that you provide references. So there are so many styles, Harvard, APA, MLA, and basically you have to check the journal guidelines and then follow the guideline that is being recommended by your target journal. But nevertheless, you should get used to creating in-text references as you make notes and write your paper in a style that you're familiar and comfortable with. This will make your referencing and the preparation of your paper much easier in the long run. And once again, I need to mention that you need to really ensure that you use a good reference management tool like Mendeley Desktop. One fine day, a PhD student came to my office and told me that it took him like 3 weeks to type 155 references into his thesis. So I asked him, the very first question I asked him is, how did you do it? He said, yeah, well, I did it manually. I said, no, that's not how you should do it. You should use a reference manager. There are many free reference managers, like Mendeley Desktop. And this will basically save a lot of time. And it basically also increases the odds of acceptance, because you don't want to cite incorrectly. Citing incorrectly also causes trouble sometimes, because if the reviewers are not able to find out the location of the original paper, they'll not be happy to proceed with the review. So all of these components are important. It's not just one or two. It's not just the introduction. It's not just the abstract. But you need to have a holistic view, and you need to ensure that the entire structure of your manuscript is in line with the requirements. So then the last section of your manuscript will include, a list of references. So basically, a reference list accompanies your in-text references and should be appended to the end of your research paper. Once again, the style and arrangement of your reference list will depend on the particular referencing style required by your discipline and by your target journal. So basically, most article databases have a cite button at the bottom of the page where you can either copy the citation in the format you want or export it to the citation software such as RefWorks, EndNote, or Mendeley. This saves a lot of time and it's really worth it. So then, moving on, how do you prepare your article for publication? So once you have achieved the correct structure, you need to edit your article to emphasize what is so unique about your approach. You need to discuss your perspective, the data, the findings, the methods, and throw new light on the area. You need to basically show people how you have managed to address the research gap by conducting a unique set of experiments and by arriving at a logical conclusion, because that's basically the aim of the entire procedure. The whole point of publishing a paper is to let people know how you have addressed a research gap. So then, now you need to really make sure you choose the right journal. Choose a journal that meets all criteria listed above. You need to basically find a good journal with a Cymago journal ranking or a Clarivate impact factor. Of course, it should be peer reviewed. You don't want to publish in some random journal. The database, basically your journal should be listed in good databases like Scopus. So databases play a very important role here. The target journal should have an international audience. And last but not the least, you need to avoid predatory journals at all costs. Now, somebody asked me this question, a particular company is charging like $5,000 to give access to the list of predatory journals. And unfortunately, I didn't get funded this year. So how do I know where to publish and where not to publish? Well, my answer was very simple. Either you need to know, you need to have access to the list of good journals, or you need to have access to the list of bad journals. But if you don't have access to the list of bad journals, then why bother? As long as you have access to the list of good journals, you're good to go. Most of the times, all the good journals are listed by Cymago and Clarivate. So if your journal is listed here, if it has a metric on one of these websites, cymagojr.com or the website maintained by Clarivate, you're good to go. You don't even need to worry about getting access to the list of predatory journals. All right, so here's the checklist for manuscript submission. Check the length, word count, figures, tables, references. Check the format for your figures, the resolution and all those things. Check the spelling convention, whether it's a British spelling or American spelling, and all those things. Many times journals have their own templates. They make certain templates available. So if that is the case, you can safely use those templates. If you go to our website, inago.com/academy, you'll see that we have recently uploaded a post on LaTeX templates for IEEE, Springer, and Elsevier. So you can always check that post. And then, of course, finally, last but not least, you need to ensure compliance with all other journal guidelines. This is very critical. So then you can go through these tips. You basically need to prepare a very good cover letter, and we'll cover some of these later once again. So now, coming to the going on to the next slide. So this is what we have covered till now. We have covered the types of papers, the structure of an academic manuscript, how to draft an academic paper, what to do, what not to do, what publishers exactly expect, and checklists for journal selection and manuscript submission. And here's the highlight of the day. So now let's quickly go over these tips. So basically, this is how you should avoid journal rejection. If you carefully review all of these tips today, the odds of your manuscript getting accepted by the target journal will increase significantly. So let's see the first slide. Now, what are the common problems? The first common problem is trying to propose something completely irrelevant, like having a wrong problem statement, or having a good problem statement but poor experimental design or poor methodology. This is the number one reason for rejection. If the problem statement itself is not legitimate, or if the experimental design is very poor, if the procedures are incorrect, or if the equipment used is suboptimal, then the odds of your manuscript getting rejected increase significantly. Now, your study needs to be novel, and it should address a known research gap, because if it doesn't do that, then again, the chances of it getting rejected will increase significantly. Can you draw any meaningful conclusion from your data? This is very critical. If you're able to draw a meaningful conclusion or several meaningful conclusions, that's exactly what the reviewers want. So if that is the case, then you have a fair chance of getting published in a decent journal. Now, here's something important. They say it's a good idea to humor the audience once in a while. So let's have a quick laugh. Avoid derivative work. So if, let's say, someone is sitting below an apple tree and saying that apples follow the law of gravitation, you should not publish a paper saying that oranges also follow the law of gravitation. That would be really funny. So yeah, just try to avoid that kind of work, because if somebody tries to publish such a paper in Nature saying that I was in Paris yesterday and I observed that oranges tend to follow the law of gravitation just like apples, your paper will never get accepted in any good journal. So that's very critical. Now, the second tip, you need to carefully review each and every single journal guideline. And this is very critical. This is something that is overlooked by many authors, even some of the experienced authors. So what happens is, if you don't follow the journal guidelines, your paper gets instantly rejected by the journal, because it makes things very easy for them. They just see that certain things have not been satisfied, they immediately reject your paper. So upfront, and you don't want that to happen. So basically ensure that whatever is your target journal, make sure you follow all the journal guidelines. Now, the second point is equally critical. Is your manuscript aligned with the scope of the journal? So let's say you have some very interesting data in the area of protein membrane interactions. So the field is chemical biology, and you accidentally submit it to a journal, or you are accidentally almost about to try to submit to a journal that is exclusively dealing with organic chemistry content, then it's going to get rejected right away. So you need to indeed ensure that your manuscript aligns well with the scope of the journal. Always submit to one journal at a time. You should never submit to 2 journals or more than 2 journals. I'll tell you, besides research ethics and all the usual stuff, one very practical reason for doing this is, let's say you submit your manuscript to journal A, and at the same time you submit it to journal B. Now what happens is, journal A will do a plagiarism check, journal B will also do a plagiarism check, and now if while doing the plagiarism check, if it gets submitted to any database, then one of the journals will immediately realize that the same manuscript has been submitted elsewhere, and that's not a good sign. That's again a reason for rejection. So you need to ensure that you submit your journal to only, you submit your manuscript to only one journal at a time. So basically go through similar articles, let's say if you're working in the area of protein membrane interactions or, nanotechnology, make sure you read similar articles published in your target journal. So this will give you a fair idea about what to do and what not to do. Then this is very important. Do not ever plagiarize. Plagiarism is frowned upon and it should not be practiced ever. You need to ensure that you cite whatever you refer to. If you don't cite and refer to something, that is again an act of plagiarism. If you directly copy, something exactly from the original manuscript and just pass it on as your own, that is plagiarism. And if you want to get a brief overview about what exactly is plagiarism and what you should do to avoid it, you can again go to inago.com/academy, and we have posted several articles explaining what exactly authors need to do in order to avoid plagiarism. Now, the third point is equally critical. You need to ensure that whatever you cite is recent, and it should be also relevant and impactful. Like, sometime back when I was trying to review a submitted thesis, I saw that the thesis was submitted in the year 2017, and most of the references were from the year 2009. So the first question I asked the PhD student was, what happened to all the recent references? How come there are absolutely no references to, recent publications? So, that is something that everybody should avoid. You should make sure that the cited work is recent, and of course, it should be relevant and meaningful. So cite as many good papers, good journals from your field. Let's say if you're working in the area of biotechnology, cite some Nature biotechnology papers, so something on those lines. And you should also avoid citing obscure journals that cannot be accessed by your reviewers and readers, because if you do that, then again it increases your chances of rejection, because the reviewers will not be able to access the articles that you have cited. Okay, number 4, you need to address all ethical concerns, like for example conflicts of interest or ethics committee approvals. Now many times what researchers do is they do this mistake very often. They finish the entire study that involves animals or human subjects, only to realize that they forgot to take the approval from the ethics committee. And that's something that you should avoid at all costs. You need to ensure that you get all the approvals ahead of time. You should ensure that you are in compliance with all the ethics committee requirements, because most of the journals will ask for proof, and if you're not able to furnish the proof, again your manuscript is likely to get rejected. Then you should ensure that all authors get listed and they meet the authorship criteria. So if you want to know more about authorship criteria, like who qualifies as the first author, who should ideally be listed as a co-author, what's a corresponding author, you should go to the COPE website. And if you go to inago.com/academy, we have posted some relevant articles on authorship on our website. Finally, do not engage ever in data fabrication or falsification. See, you'll be surprised. Nowadays, journals have very sophisticated methods for detecting not just image manipulation, but also data fabrication. So let's say you obtained a set of numbers from an actual experiment. Then the people sitting in the journal's office will know that those numbers are real. Whereas if they have been fabricated using an Excel sheet, there are sophisticated methods of finding that out. And nowadays, journals are increasingly demanding raw data. So if they feel that a certain set of experiments looks too good to be true, the journal will ask you to provide the raw data and then subject it to some kind of a statistical treatment, and then they'll know right away whether the data are real or whether they have been fabricated by someone sitting in front of a Microsoft Excel sheet. So, or if it happens to be an image, they'll know right away if it's an original image obtained from a confocal microscope or whether the researcher has fabricated or manipulated the image with Adobe Photoshop. All of those things are very easy to find out these days. Okay, so moving on, you need to double check the data for accuracy. That's very important. You need to avoid discrepancies. So let's say if you make a particular statement towards the beginning of the paper and you make an exactly opposite statement at the end of the paper, that's not what reviewers want to see. You need to be very consistent. Make sure the units and unit symbols are correct. I see this error many times, like the manuscript is really good or the thesis is really good, but the units are missing or the unit symbols are inaccurate. So all those things should be avoided. You also need to ensure that the results and conclusion indeed answer the study question, because if they don't, then again, that increases the chances of rejection. Because if you state that this is the problem I'm trying to address, and then your results and conclusion talk nothing about that problem, then again, the reviewers will instantly reject the manuscript. Here's an example. So let's say if somebody is trying to say that, the width of the road is 40 meters, then the person should ensure that there's a space between the number and its corresponding unit. So all these small things really matter, So if you basically want to increase the odds of acceptance, you have to ensure that all of these things are taken care of. You need to be in compliance with the journal requirements. All right, so moving on. You also need to make sure that all figures, illustrations are technically correct. Your figures and tables should, showcase all the relevant data. They should be fairly symbolic or representative. You also need to ensure that the statistical analysis is flawless. And there are various ways of doing that. You should also not misinterpret your results. So whatever results you get, you have to very faithfully and very transparently interpret them. If you don't do that, the reviewers are really smart people. They can immediately see what you're trying to say and what the reality is. And then that will increases the chances of rejection. So make sure you do not misinterpret your results. And of course, you should never do any image manipulation or data fabrication, data falsification. All those things are to be avoided at all costs. All right, number 7. Have you really drafted a good cover letter for the journal editor? Because many times what happens is people really draft a very good manuscript and they do not draft a very good cover letter. And then basically the editor feels that if the cover letter is so bad, the manuscript will be even worse. So basically the cover letter is not the same as the abstract or introduction. So what the cover letter should include is some of these points. What was known previously? So did you basically conduct a good literature survey? And how is your study different from what others have done? So what are the key conclusions? Regardless of how great your study is, will it be of any importance to the target audience? So the journal's target audience basically needs to get what they want to see. And if you're not able to do that, then again, the chances of rejection increase. Are you excited about your findings? You have to convey that through your cover letter very effectively. Is the article original and not being considered elsewhere? This is very critical because just like I said, if you submit concurrently to 2 different journals or more than 2 journals, journals always do a plagiarism check, and in that if your manuscript gets submitted to a database, they'll immediately realize that you have also submitted to another journal, and that's not going to be an ideal situation. Now, cover letter should be ideally only 1 page long. I have seen many people writing like 3-page long cover letters. So journal editors do not have so much time to read your cover letter. So make sure it is concise. Make sure it does not exceed 1 page in length. Okay, number 8. If you are trying to resubmit to the same journal, you need to make sure that you have addressed the referee comments effectively. Because if you don't address the referee comments effectively and you're still trying to resubmit to the journal, then the chances of the manuscript getting rejected again increase. So you need to ensure that if you're trying to resubmit, you better address the referee questions effectively before even considering resubmission. Now, you may not agree with what the referees are saying all the time. That's perfectly fine. But if you do not agree with what your referees are saying for a very valid reason, then you need to ensure that the journal editor completely understands what you are trying to say. And that happens only if you write a very strong letter. In some cases, it could be a rebuttal letter. In some cases, it could be a normal cover letter, following up on the resubmission and all that. But in general, you should not resubmit to the same journal after a major rejection. After you face a major rejection, do not ever submit to the same journal again. You can always try submitting to a different journal. The impact factors are always available. So if you think that your journal, your manuscript is not suitable for Nature or Science, you can always go for another journal with a slightly different impact factor. So that's how you should go about. All right, so moving on. Now, it is very important to proofread your manuscript for language, grammar, punctuation. Many times what happens is journal reviewers reject the manuscript right away. They reject the manuscript upfront as soon as they see that it is full of grammatical errors, full of grammar errors and punctuation errors and all of those things. So you can always get your manuscript reviewed. A colleague can review it or an expert can review it. If you're a PhD student, your advisor can review it. But I would rather recommend hiring professional scientific editing services like our own Inago.com. We provide editing support. We have an editing service. We have fully dedicated qualified experts with PhDs who actually edit your manuscripts. So they know what you're talking about. They know something about your subject because they have a PhD in your field or a similar field, and they're also good at editing. So I would definitely recommend hiring professional editing services, and you can check our website today, inago.com. And while you're on it, you can also check inago.com/academy. We have posted 1,000+ articles, and basically those articles you can access free of cost. We have recently, changed our design, so you'll be impressed with the new design. So make sure you check inago.com and for the services. And if you want to see our newly designed website, make sure you check inago.com/academy today. Now, here's an interesting example. Just try this exercise today. So you will realize what I'm trying to convey. Just go to Microsoft Word, open a Word document, and type this sentence. Type the sentence, I like red flowers. But when you type red, instead of typing R-E-D, just type R-E-A-D. Surprise, Microsoft Word is not going to detect this error. So that's why you basically need help from professional editing services, to address this issue. All right, so the last tip. Have you performed decent statistical analysis? Is the statistical analysis correct? Do you need help with journal selection or submission? Or do you want to, go through a mock peer review before submitting your manuscript to an actual journal? Well, we have some good news for you. You can visit inago.com today, and you can, you can purchase our premium service. We basically help you select journals. We help you with, with the peer review process by conducting a mock peer review. So all of these things will really help you. So I would definitely recommend visiting this website today, inago.com, and try to see if we could be of help to you. All right, so these are some resources. We have a very good website. It goes by the name Inago Academy, inago.com/academy. And we have posted 1,000+ free articles on various topics. All these topics, basically, anything and everything from journal selection to manuscript drafting, grant writing, how to promote your research, alternative careers for PhD students, so forth and so on. So you can also visit AuthorAid, Academia.edu, ORCID, PubMed, ResearchGate, Mendeley, so forth and so on. Now, if you have any questions after today's webinar, and I think we have a couple of minutes left, you can post your questions to our free question and answer forum. I think we have a couple of minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, please type your questions in the chat box. We'll try to address a couple of questions, and because we have only a couple of minutes left, if we are not able to address all the questions, you can go to inago.com/academy/Q&A and submit your questions there. We will answer each and every question that has been sent in our direction. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. Please type your questions in the chat box. And meanwhile, if you want to download our app, please feel free to do so. So does anybody have any questions? Please feel free to type them in the chat box. Okay, so I'm just giving you a couple of minutes so that you can type a few questions. All right, I think we have one or two questions. So I'll start addressing those. And then let's see if more questions pour in. We'll see if we have, if you're able to address them. Let's see. What's the first question? All right, so many people are thanking us for covering most of the topics. Well, I'm glad we could do that, and I'm glad we could be of help of you. So thank you. Thanks for attending. And let me ask a couple of questions. Let me provide a couple of answers to you. So the first question is how to select a target journal, for your publishing requirements. Basically, the way to do this is basically, first of all, try to find out what you're trying to publish. Then go to simagojr.com or Clarivate Analytics website. They'll give you a list of journals with journal metrics, impact factors, and then you can try to see. You'll basically have a list of good journals, and then you can try to see what others in your field, where all the researchers in your field have published their recent work. So that way you'll get a good idea. So for that, you can access many of these websites like PubMed or ACS, and try to get a feel of where other researchers have published their work. So that will help you in identifying the right journal for your publishing requirements. You can also check the journal rankings. Now the next question is on journal rankings. Now there are various ways of doing that, but the two most established websites are simagojr.com and Clarivate Analytics, or formerly Web of Science. So these two basically provide journal metrics, and if your journal is listed on one of these websites, then it's considered to be a good journal. But having said that, don't select a journal that has been that is right on the border, like like a journal with an H-index of like 3 or 4, or a journal that has barely made it to the list of approved journals. So that's basically the right strategy. And I think, let's see, there is one more question on whether you would be getting a link. Yes, so after today's webinar, we'll follow up with all the attendees and we'll provide a link to the recorded webinar. So you'll get a link to the recorded video, and so you can go back and check what all was mentioned. So once again, Thanks everybody. I see a couple of compliments here, so thank you for that. And we are glad we could be of help to you. So make sure when we send out a survey, whatever you feel needs to be improved, or if you think the webinar was good, or if you have any suggestions, please feel free to share them with us. And just wait for an email. We'll be communicating with you very soon. I thank you once again. Thanks everybody. It has been a wonderful day today. And I thank you for your attention. Thanks for your time. And we'll meet again very soon. We'll follow up with you via email. So have a fantastic day or a fantastic night, depending on where you're located. And see you soon. Thank you.